With more of us expected to vote than ever before, one of our most trusted institutions is about to be put to the test at a time when insiders are already raising alarms. Many of you have reached out to us to talk about mail slowdowns in your areas. So the News 4i team partnered with NBC stations around the country to put the post office to the test. Investigative reporter Jody Fleischer shares what they found.
If you're like most Americans these days, you probably get more mail like this than you do the old-fashioned way. But you've probably heard more about the U.S. Postal Service in the past few weeks than ever before.
I just hope people are paying attention.
Sharon Dixon and her Northeast D.C. neighbors didn't need to watch the Postmaster General testifying before Congress or the hundreds of protesters marching past his Kalorama home to know there are problems with the mail.
I don't get mail on a daily basis. I get mail maybe once, if I'm lucky, twice a week.
She says service has been declining for a few years, but it's gotten really bad this summer. Delayed bills, missing birthday cards, and lots of questions.
Where is it? If it's not coming to me, where is it? Is the mail lost? Has it been stolen?
The American Postal Workers Union spoke up in the last few weeks, blaming recent changes put in place by their new boss, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy.
It's affecting the job that we're trying to do and that we are very proud of doing.
Union President Mark Dimmenstein says the removal of mail sorting machines has slowed processing in some places, but he says DeJoy's new policy forcing trucks to leave on time is the main cause of delays. Mail that isn't ready gets left for the next day or days later.
Now they're saying just leave it behind. And, the DNA of a postal worker is never leave mail behind. So it's very troubling to us. Very concerning.
The I-Team mailed Sharon 3 letters from post offices within a half hour of her home. Arlington, Virginia on Tuesday, Glen Echo, Maryland Wednesday, and Washington, D.C. on Thursday. All 3 arrived together that Saturday. DeJoy told Congress he meant leave on time with all of the mail on board.
At no time did I say don't put the mail on the trucks when they left on time. This was not a hard, direct, everything must leave on time. We still have thousands of trucks a day that leave late.
DeJoy said he was keeping that policy, although he did agree to walk back a reduction in overtime to make up for work hours lost when 40,000 postal employees were forced into COVID quarantine.
Somebody has to work those hours for you to be able to get your mail.
On August 14th, I-Teams from a dozen NBC stations around the country mailed each other 155 first-class letters across town, across state lines, and across the nation.
I think it's a great idea. I think it's a really great idea.
Sharon's neighbor, Nancy Dorsey, says her sister in Tennessee is having similar problems, and then she started hearing from her neighbors.
I did not think it was just me, but I was just surprised that there was so many other people that was having that same issue.
The I-Teams tested home addresses in major cities like Washington, D.C., and suburbs like Ashburn, Virginia, and Columbia, Maryland. 88% of our letters arrived within 3 business days, just as the Postal Service advertises. Another 10% made it within a week. But 2 letters still haven't arrived. It's been 17 days.
We had mail is backed up to like the early part of July that was delivered, like just recently.
In the NBC test, 1 letter took 6 days to get from D.C. to Maryland, the same amount of time as a letter from California. The inconsistency makes Nancy and Sharon worry about getting their November ballot, which the D.C. Elections Office is mailing to every voter. These postcards to confirm voters' addresses went out weeks ago.
Did you get this?
I never got that. My husband, who is a registered voter, he never got that. We never received that at our house.
Nancy says she'll take her ballot to an election drop box if it arrives by mail. Sharon isn't even counting on that.
I'm gonna stand in line, because even if the ballot arrives and I fill it out, I don't have faith that it'll be processed.
The Postmaster General has acknowledged the mail slowdown and said he's already making changes to fix it. He said ballots will get priority in November and that the Postal Service absolutely has the capacity to handle the extra volume for the election. Jody Fleischer, News 4 I-Team.
The Postal Service is not funded by tax dollars. It relies on revenue from postage stamps and postage fees. It did ask Congress for $25 billion in COVID relief, and the union says that is on par with other hard-hit industries.
126 letters, all mailed on the same September day. Some around the corner, others across the country. Why?
We've been having a postal service since Ben Franklin's days. In all of my life, and I'm not going to tell you my age, I've never seen where you've had the issue with mail like this.
Joyce Harris lives in Northeast DC and says in a good week she gets mail maybe 3 days, and sending it is even worse.
I sent out a sympathy card. I have since gone to the memorial service for this loved one, and they haven't gotten the sympathy card yet, and they live in the DMV area.
The News 4i team found distance isn't a problem. Almost all of the 24 letters we mailed locally reached their destinations in 2 or 3 business days, just as the Postal Service promises. But a letter from Dallas to DC took 7 days to arrive.
This becomes very important because of the type of mail that you're relying on coming to your mailbox.
For Joyce, it's the mail order medicine she takes every day. The retired veteran says she's run out of pills and has had to go to the base to pick up more in person during COVID. And that's not even her biggest concern.
I don't want my vote to not count. I don't want it to be 10 days after the election, you might see my ballot. I don't want that.
That won't happen, according to Postmaster General Louis DeJoy, recently speaking with the Economic Club of D.C.
The American public needs to know we are prepared and committed to deliver election mail.
Ray Robinson with the local Postal Workers Union for the nation's capital and Southern Maryland agrees, even though this summer had the worst mail delays he's seen.
The morale is down because it's in the DNA of postal employees to do everything possible to get the mail out on time.
Robinson faults a DeJoy order forcing mail trucks to leave on time, even when they aren't fully loaded.
In the past, the drivers would wait until all the mail was given to them, but now when they have a cutoff time, that means some mail is left, which causes delays because it keeps building up.
DeJoy has clarified that policy and says the resulting service delays have lessened.
I work with the team to get those trucks, to run on time with the mail in them. That was the direction. It was a good plan. We could have had a better execution.
The Postal Service says delays have also been worsened by the pandemic. An estimated 40,000 workers have had to quarantine. Staff shortages in COVID hotspots could continue through the election season.
Yes, I believe the Postal Service can handle it, but as citizens who choose to vote by mail, anyone doing so should put their ballot in the mail as early as possible.
Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger recently surveyed Virginia voters about their mail service and says she heard from more than 1,200 in just one weekend.
The delays that we've seen mean a backlog of mail, and for ballots that must be returned by a certain point in time, that leaves the potential that one's vote won't count.
Albeit a small potential, 88% of our NBC letters arrived in 1 to 3 days. 97% made it within 5 days, 98% within a week. But after 2 weeks, 2 of our letters still hadn't arrived.
If it's your mail that has trouble, that's your vote, that's your voice.
Spanberger says if just 1% of the letters had trouble, that's significant, with polls showing as many as 75 million people planning to vote by mail. NBC did a similar test back in August and found one letter took a month to get from Chicago to New York City, and one from New York to Houston still hasn't arrived. It's been more than 6 weeks.
While perhaps unscientific, it is wholly relevant to the individual experiences that people are having.
In D.C., where all 500,000 registered voters will get a ballot mailed whether they requested one or not, Joyce Harris would love to just vote and mail it back, but she doesn't have confidence in the system.
I don't have it right now like I used to, no. And I wish that there was something that can really seriously be done.
The Postal Service tells us it will begin to add additional resources later this week, including transportation to help handle all of the election mail. And if you are going to vote by mail, the best advice from the post office and the politicians is as soon as you get your ballot, fill it out and send it back immediately. Jody Fleischer, News 4i team.
While the U.S. Postal Service works to improve on-time delivery across the country, a new report shows a major slowdown right here in our area and the second worst on-time delivery in the nation. The News 4 I-team has been working with NBC stations around the country to track the speed of mail delivery for months leading up to the election. Investigative reporter Jody Fleischer has more on what they found and what it could mean for your mailed ballot.
In our latest test, we mailed more than 800 letters. Most of the ones that remained here in the DMV arrived within 3 days, despite the slowdown. But the I-team found that might not be good enough to get your ballot back to the elections office in time, particularly if you live here in Northern Virginia. With more than 3 million voters in the capital region getting mailed ballots for this election, the News 4 I-team put the Postal Service to the test, mailing hundreds of letters in August, September, and October. We found the letters with on-time delivery, which the post office describes as arrival within 3 days, has dropped from 88% in August and September to just 79% in October.
Of all the things I've used the mail for in the past, any time this year, receiving and mailing back my ballot is the most important.
Virginia voter Tim Schick tracked his ballot on the state's website to make sure it arrived at the Fairfax County Elections Office.
And that showed that it was received the day after we mailed it, which was a huge relief.
The I-team tracked our own letters using special barcodes supplied by a Maryland company called Snailworks.
It allows you to see when your mail's been entered into the mail stream and when it's been sorted down and given to the carrier for delivery.
President Dave Lewis was able to see that every letter we mailed in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia was picked up on the same day and postmarked that night. He could also see what happened to the 23 letters that did not arrive within 3 days.
The final sortation didn't happen, so it didn't get to the carrier.
He says almost all of our mail got to its destination post office, but got hung up in the delivery process.
I think it's something the post office needs to pay attention to.
Especially in Virginia, where ballots postmarked on Election Day must arrive at the elections office by noon on Friday in order to be counted. D.C. and Maryland give their ballots 10 days to arrive.
If it arrives after that Friday, like the mail is slow, are you out of luck?
Unfortunately, we can't count those ballots.
Angie Maniglia-Turner is head of elections in Alexandria, where 75% of the mailed ballots are already back in.
We always get some received after the election that unfortunately can't be counted.
In our test, nearly half of the 26 letters mailed locally in Virginia took 3 days to arrive. Dave says Virginia's noon requirement on the third day could be a problem for some last-minute mailers.
Yeah, I think there's a risk there. When they start putting times in, it gets a little challenging.
But the American Postal Workers Union says ballots should fare even better than the letters in our test.
The mail ballots are really getting priority treatment, and I think people can be very confident about that.
Union President Mark Dimmenstein says workers have been trained to expedite ballots through the process to make sure they're properly scanned and postmarked, since those are critical for ballots to be accepted after Election Day. 10 of the 800 NBC letters nationwide were missing a postmark.
We have election mail task forces going on in every single area. There's eyes and ears now all day long on the balloting process.
But in most DMV elections, showing up late is the #1 reason a ballot gets rejected. Dave said, think of it like mailing your Christmas cards on Christmas Day.
If it's election day, I'd probably look for a drop box.
Elections officials are all tracking how many mailed ballots have yet to come back, and so are we. On election night, we'll be able to show you how many ballots could still be on their way, and that could have a serious impact on the timing of the release of election results. Jody Fleischer, News 4 I-team.
Now, a Postal Service spokesperson told us, the I-team rather, that they couldn't substantiate our test results without a review. But on Friday, the agency announced yet another decrease in on-time delivery performance for first-class mail from the week before. And they said that voters should mail their ballots at least a week before their state's deadline. To check out the results of the I-team's other postal tests, just visit our NBC Washington app and click on Investigations.